Welcome, folks, to another session of ST Skills. Today, we are going to do a system design mock interview, and we have Amrita with us. She's going to act as an interviewer, and Rahul is going to act as a candidate. With this, I would give the podium to these folks. Over to you, folks.
Yeah. So hi, hey Rahul. I'm your interviewer. I am based out of Seattle. Primary experience has been in cloud software companies for somewhere around 10 years of experience. And I think you can give a one-line intro if you would like.
Hey Amrita and hey ST Skills. I'm Rahul over here. I'm originally from India and currently living in Bellevue, Washington. I am a SDE1 working in a mid-level company for 3 years. I'm targeting SDE2 roles and FANG is like, and Big Tech is like my main target companies.
Thanks, and sounds good. So I think if you are ready, we can jump right into the interview.
Sure, I can start with the interview. So I just want to know more about event reservation and ticketing. Can you give a little bit more introduction on what exactly is the system and what exactly is the system?
Sounds good. I would suggest that we try to come up with, let's say, some functional requirements, right? Can you think of maybe a couple and we can build from there? If not, I can help. Yeah.
Okay. So the first thing, when I see the question, I think about book my show or some kind of ticket master. But my first question is, what is the target audience? Like, is it worldwide? Is it just US? Is it just some college?
That's a great question. I would say let's try to do it for, let's say, 3 cities, right? In US. Yeah.
Okay. The second question is this only for movies or any kind of event, like some kind of a concert events?
So I think let's design something which is for a sports event. So let's say the Seahawks matches, right? Or any other game. Yeah.
Okay. So I'll be targeting more on the sports. My third question is this a web app, a mobile app, or some kind of an API?
I think let's do both.
Okay. And then how many users are we assuming, expecting?
Yeah. I think, why don't you come up with some ballpark numbers?
Okay, yeah, I'll come later in the assumptions part. I think one of the few questions is do the payment, is this on in the app or is it a third party that the app will call?
What do you think is the most important part of this problem? Is payments the most? So then let's just say that we are gonna use a third party.
Third party for payment. And I can just type it later maybe because it saves time. So I think reservation is the most important. For example, let's assume seats or tickets like a client will reserve seats or tickets. Now, I'm assuming concurrency is going to be a very, very important part. Let me just have a non-functional requirement also, side by side.
Sure.
And I think the first and the most major is high concurrency. What I mean by high concurrency is if 2 users are trying to book a seat at the same time, then what should be the thing? So my assumption is that the first come, first serve should be done. Do you think that is the assumption, or how should we solve this system?
Can you repeat your question? Sorry, I didn't get it.
So if 2 users are trying to book a seat at the same time, then what should happen? Ideally, the first come, first serve works.
Yeah, let's do that. Yeah.
while annotating bot. Okay.
So
and then,
give me a sec, let me clear this. How this got started annotating?
I just start like ask some functional requirements meanwhile. So if a user is there a time period that is logged in, like 5 minutes or something, other users will not be able to like book the ticket. Is that something we want? Or
I think for the non-functional requirements, Rahul, right? Typically, yeah, it's just that for you can imagine, right? It's a reservation system, like people are making payments. So I think one thing is you shouldn't double charge, right? Those are the sorts of things, I think, right?
So
Yeah.
one like Rahul, do you see option on the top stop annotating, like because who is sharing screen can control that it won't let anybody to annotate.
I actually did hide that, there is a setting. I actually hide that window. I don't know if I can open that window again. There are options.
Yeah, it should be on the top somewhere.
No, I actually hide that window. There is a window, but there is an option to hide it. Let me.
So you should see something like on the top. Yeah, you should see somewhere on the top, like not here. Let me find.
Possible to stop screen sharing now.
Wait, I'm going to pause the recording for a sec then.
So yeah, you can see the screen.
Yeah.
Okay. So yeah, in the I'll just start. A non-functional requirement, I just wrote no double charge. And in the functional, I returned we can book 10 seats like in one slot, 1 to 10 seats, and there is no partial reservations.
Yeah.
That's something I added. Okay. I think that's fine for now. So we can start with assumptions very quickly. Let's assume that how many sports events will be in 3 cities. So let's assume there are like 2 events in 1 week, and comparing 3 cities, so it will be 6. But one event has about 10,000 seats, and timings. So I believe there should be only one timing. Like in movies, there are different slots, but for sports event, I believe there is only one timing. So yeah, that's one assumptions. Let's keep assumptions for now. If there are any other assumptions, I just quickly note it down over here. And here is my estimations. Total seats is equal to 3 cities into 2 events into 10,000 per week, which is equal to 60,000 per week. Now, if I'm trying to estimate the throughput, so if I make it per second, this will come out to be divided by 7, divided by 24, 6,000. I am not. So I'm just trying to calculate what exactly can be. Why? So I'm not sure, but it will be around 2.5 or 3, let's assume. I hope. Just trying to understand. I think 600 divided by 7 is 600.
I think
Less than that.
Yeah. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah. So I think the scale is a little bit on the lower side, right? Yeah, I think we should do a little bit, so that you can, I think that's a little bit better. Yeah.
Okay, so let's assume 20 events in 1 week, and hopefully So I'm just trying to calculate like what can be the request for a second. Maybe I'm not very sure with this one, but I'm assuming this one. I'm not sure with the calculation like this one, but that's something. And for writes, so I'm assuming a read to write ratio is 1:1.
Read to write ratio is 1:1. Okay.
Or we can have more read also. If the users want just to view the ticket, we can have like 5:1.
Yeah, let's do that.
Okay. And then secondly, our database, like the booking ID and all, will be stored for only 1 week. After 1 week, the event is over, and we will assume like the database is that the data is no longer stored.
I think let's just store the data for about 2 years. Yeah.
2 years? Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, because sometimes, you know, you want to go back and look at history. There's like auditing and a lot of other stuff, right? Yeah.
So that is over here. Estimations. So storage can be also one thing, but if I just assume I'll do that after the database maybe. I want to go to the APIs first. Is that fine, or do you want to go to database?
I think if you, in this kind of a problem, I think it might be easier for you if you come up with a data model and then maybe go and do the APIs. Yeah.
Okay, so let's start with the data model. The first one that I'm seeing over here will be user. I'm just trying to very quickly list like brainstorm everything that I can think of a user. User ID, user email, or maybe date of birth if there are age restrictions, then location, and creation time. That will be, I think, if there is anything else, I'll just add it. But this is all I can think for now. Very quickly, let me just write down an event. Event ID, event title, event description. What else can we think of the event? We can have the timings, location, the day, if you want any days there, number of seats. It's also something we can have in an event. Let me just give over here for now. Okay. The next thing, what we can think is seats. Okay. A seat ID, then seat belongs to event ID, or status. Status means like, is it currently going to be booked? Is it available, or is it all permanently booked? That is one thing. One thing about functional requirements: can user cancel their reservations, or once it is booked, they cannot cancel?
Yeah, I think it's good to design something like that, the cancellation feature, but I wouldn't hold you on doing it right now. Yeah, let's just build a smaller set of functions. Yeah.
If we have time, we'll look at it.
Yeah.
Seat ID, event ID, status, and what else can we? Yeah, I can think right now, but this is the most important that I can think right now. Anything other than that are we missing? We have a location. Is there any premium users or free users, like seat premium users has a different type of seat or something? Or we are, for now, we just assume every seat is a single type?
Yeah, I think we have to segregate the seats because most typically that would be the case, right? Yeah.
Something like is premium. I think a better way, I am not sure, because if there are 3 or 4 tires, then let's see the tires, like what kind of a tire is it? Anything else that I would think of right now? Ratings, we don't have rating. I'm assuming like, let's not keep it for now. If we have time, we'll discuss. So this is something that I'm thinking of right now for the data model. Then user, oh, sorry. And another thing is booking, like which seat is it been booked or not? So we need some kind of to use that which user has booked which ticket. So we can have another over here, like seat ID, user ID, booking time, status. Is it like currently in booking or is it completely booked? That is also one thing. And what else? Is there anything else? Event ID we can write, but since we already have in seat ID, I'm not writing event ID over here. Description.
Yeah, one thing, Rahul, I would like to consider is from your booking data model, it seems like one user can only buy one seat.
There will be multiple rows. Like, do you want a list of seats over here? Okay, I can do that. This is another design, like we can have list of seat ID. But what I was considering is like we can have multiple rows with a single user ID and different seat IDs. So that was I was saying. The primary key will be a combination of these two.
Yeah, I think then you are duplicating the booking time and status, right? Let's say a user buys 5 seats, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, but I think we could live with that. Sure. Okay.
And so this is what I can think of. A user to event, there is no connection, but event to seats, like it's 1:n. One event can have multiple seats. One user can book multiple seats. So again, 1:n. I think this is the data model. If I can think anything, I will just come again and like modify it.
Yeah. Also in the events, I think you have a total number of seats, right? But if you have different tiers, that might need to be adjusted some way, right? But yeah, yeah.
So I'm just thinking how will maybe we don't want an event. We can have a tier and we can have another table for tier. That's something I've been thinking. I'm not if that is really a good design, but this is your ID and what's the description? It is like, is it premium or like corner seat or something like this. That's also one thing can be which kind of this and how many seats can it have. So if there are 3 cities, is it possible that each city has a different tier? Like, for example, if there is 10 premium seats in Seattle, maybe in Portland, there can be 20 premium cities, and in San Francisco, 50 cities, something like that.
Yeah, typically that would be the case. Yeah.
So I'll not mention anything about the number of seats over here.
Got it.
So the next, I think we'll go with the high level design. Is that fine with the high level design?
Yeah, okay. That's fine.
So I'm just trying to draw a very general web service and trying to like design how we can like improve on that. So the first thing, usually we have a client, okay, and then CDN or DNS is there, which is very much close to the client. It helps in like DNS is help to resolve the URL. Usually we have a load balancer, and then we have a web service. A web service is used to do the HTTP stuff like authentication and all. Then there is some kind of an app server. App server is used to, like, in our case, it will be used to reserve the tickets and make sure that the client is like it can hold or something. Next, we have databases. So SQL database. And is there any other database which can scale individually? So I'm just using one SQL for here. But if we have something that is independent, like something like user can be used in NoSQL, so we can put the user in NoSQL and the seats and booking in SQL. That also can be done. But I'm just assuming everything is SQL for simplicity. We also have a cache that the app server can work directly with. What else design considerations I can think of? So let me think of this thing over here. Okay. I'm just typing about design. So DB is SQL, because consistency is very important for us. In database, what else can I think of? What is that? Caching. So we cache like 80-20 rule, if I assume. We have a total of, we have 660,000 per week, I'm assuming. So 80-20 rule, if I see it, so around 12,000 per week is the cache tickets, or the cache bookings we can assume. Then what else can I think of right now? Partitioning. So I think currently we have like less data, so we can fit in one server, but it is a bad design for a single point of failure. So it is a good way to partition it. So if I just ways to partition the data, how can we partition it? So the first, I think, is based on regions or cities, as you told. Like each city has its own shard. Seattle has its own shard. Portland has its own shard, something like that. So its own shards. Advantage is that for a particular city, it is easy to find. And I am assuming that the users are more interested in their own city rather than flying to another city. So this is one thing, a very advantage. Disadvantage will be, for example, if something like Seahawks is there, which has more, what we say, more hot event or something like that. There are more people interested in that compared to some other events. So that kind of an event is a what to say, like more traffic and ununiform distribution. Consistent hashing can be used for that. The second way in which we partition is, so what else? User ID is not a good way to partition. Seat ID. So seats are distributed, more uniform distribution. So that is one thing. Yeah.
Yeah. So Rahul, for the caching, right? It's for the caching. It's good that you mentioned that you're gonna use a 80-20 rule. I'm wondering if you have considered what kind of caching strategy would you use?
Caching. So most popular is least recently used. Can we use LRU in this kind of a cache? Actually, I think we can use. So once the event is complete, so first of all, once the event is not completed, we cannot remove any of a ticket of that event from the cache. But once that event is complete, we can remove from the cache. So maybe like some kind of a time-based strategy, like once the event ends, you remove from cache. I think that would be a better instead of least recently used. Because if I'm thinking, if there is a Seahawks event and the ticket which is supposed to be removed from the cache is also of the same event, then there is going to be a database cache hit, and you have to go to database every time. So this is why I think time-based will be a better one.
Okay, yeah, I think one other thing to think about would be in a reservation system, right? What is the nature of the data that could be cached, right? If you think through that, then I think we can also come up with, some other caching strategies. But yeah, I think we can take it up towards the end as well. Yeah.
So okay, we'll take it in the end, but just a one-liner: seat ID, status, and timestamp. If we don't want timestamp, we can have maybe the user ID also. Okay, and then also if we have a TTL, like this time to live, I'm generally assuming 1 week, but we can decide on that. In cache, usually have a time to expire. Partitions. So I think that is all. So we are not sorting anything based on the timestamp. So the ID will not have anything about timestamp. I think a general seat ID is also feasible. We can just to make sure that we have unique we can implement a key generation alternate server which can like generate unique keys. But I'm assuming for our service we do not have so many large unique keys. So I'm just trying to go with the simple one.
Okay. Yeah.
Next, what else can be the design one? So one thing I can see is how will a system know that like my booking is currently inactive or I am in the waitlisting stage.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
So the first thing when we try to reserve, we just see if there is a lock or the status. If there is a lock or status, like I go to the waiting state and I'm waiting for the tickets to be available. So that is one thing. So active state, like I'm assuming we have 5 minutes, right, for active.
Yeah, we could do 5. Yeah.
Okay, I have not written it, but okay. Let's assume 5 minutes. So there is a 5-minute waiting time. Now, after 5 minutes, the user will get a response that is either the ticket is already booked by someone else or the ticket is available. If the ticket is available, it goes to first come first serve. Like the user which was in the waiting in the first will get the chance to book it. If it is unavailable or somebody else has booked it, what can be the options? So one option is that we directly cancel, like reject the user and we move him to the landing page. The second option is to give him suggestions like what all other tickets can he book. So I'm going with the first option. Go to landing page if booking is unsuccessful. I hope that's fine with you, like, this option.
Yeah.
Okay. Now my second thing was active. How will our status know, like our service know all the bookings in active queue? So one way is to have in the database, we like brute force is to query the database each time and then sort it and aggregate it. But I am assuming this to be a very time consuming process and also very heavy, read heavy or some kind of load heavy. A better way will be to create a linked hash map based on the time. So what I think was like there is a node over here. The first timestamps, like the older timestamps are at the head, and then we have a booking ID, user ID, status. So I'm treating this as an object, and the timestamp is like the key value, something like that, is based on a linked hash map I'm taking. The advantage of a linked hash map is that we can go to any node at any time, and if suppose this booking is available, we can remove it in faster. So there is less latency. Again, we can do it in very fast seconds. Also, for timestamp, like if 5 minutes has been expired, we can easily know which events to be removed. Also, just one more thing I want to mention right now. We say 5 minutes, but our service will have like 5 minutes, 10 seconds to keep a buffer. In the event of network failure, if the user has done the payment, but there is a network failure, so we don't want to keep the user waiting. So there is like a 10-second buffer just to make sure the network recovers and the payment goes.
Okay. Yeah. Sounds good.
So this is based on the time. I feel like there are two linked hash maps, one for active and one for waiting. So all users which are currently in active status are in a different hash map. All users which are currently in a waiting status are in a different hash map. The advantage of such a thing is that once the active is either removed, we know like is it like a success or a failure. We can very easily remove the users from the waiting. So it is much faster. That is what I was thinking. Do you have any feedback regarding this design?
I think one thing would be, I don't think we did a walkthrough of the simpler design, like the boxes you drew on the top, right? I don't think we connected, or did we do a walkthrough? We didn't, right? Yeah, let's take a sample, request, and let's just walk through, right? That how is the data kind of flowing through the system? Yeah, that's, I think, somewhat important. Yeah.
So I'll just spend some time to have some arrows and connect over here.
Yeah, it's okay if you don't want to join the arrows, but just maybe even verbally walking through is okay. But yeah, whatever is most convenient. Yeah.
So we usually have a client. When I say actor, it's either a web app or a mobile app that is that is trying to book the tickets.
Okay.
CDN or a DNS. A DNS is usually used to resolve the URL, and a CDN is to fetch static content to have like faster loading time. Load balancer. So we have a very small service over here, but usually for a very large service, we want to make sure that like the requested are routed uniformly, so that like each request gets processed as fast as possible. That was the time of load balancer. We usually use round robin, or there is some kind of a smart load balancer that makes sure that the least load of the web service takes precedence. Web servers, instead of service, let's say servers, are usually like API gateways that do HTTP stuff like SSL authentication, IP whitelisting, and rate limiters. From web server to app server. App server is our main this booking server we can try about. We also have linked hash map. So let me just quickly write over here linked hash maps. The function of the app server is to make sure that the user can book the tickets, or if there is a waiting time, it keeps track of the waiting time. And if user is not, it either sends the rejection ratio, or like the what we say, it keeps it in the waiting status. So that is something for app server. We can have a load balancer in between the app server and the database. I'm in my system, I'm not considering it, but if there is heavy load, we can do it. SQL DB keeps track of all our user events, seats, and booking. And then there is a cache, which just keeps a track of the most frequently used or the most hot seats or the most hot events. Link, we have a box. So let's have like I'm putting the database over here together. So the linked hash map and the SQL DB might communicate with each other. And over here like this. This is not what I wanted. But anyways, so this is like they will like communicate with each other and trying to make sure that the data is concurrent, and it has like is that very less latency. The user has easily able to do it. Is there anything? Yeah.
Yeah, one thing is maybe, you yourself mentioned that you are putting a load balancer, even though you didn't, we actually didn't estimate the scale properly, right? But we still are using a load balancer, right? Which is okay. But what is the downside of using a load balancer in your mind?
Latency, not latency, but there is a little bit more time. First of all, there is cost also. Hardware, if you are using, it is expensive. Software also, it will take some time to route the request and to like find the best server. And if you're using some kind of a zookeeper, then it will take more time. So that is one thing, like the time will be increased, I believe.
Okay, and I think one other point that I had is, let's say if a request is coming from a cell phone client, right, a mobile client, versus a request that's coming from a web client, is this system, because that was one of the functional requirements, right?
Oh, okay. So cell phones usually have less data. Like we want to reduce the amount of data that we have. So is that something that we want to consider? Or,
Yeah, I mean, you don't need to change the diagram maybe, but if you can just verbally walk me through, what are some of the adjustments would you make and where to handle, serving requests differently to web and mobile clients.
okay. So I'm assuming we are using HTTP long polling for mobile clients, and like they will request the data on demand, like whenever we are reading, uh, or maybe HTTP long polling is not the best one.
Yeah,
Uh,
I mean, instead of technical terms, I think long polling is, I think, in my mind, more for the notification side of things, right? Let's say some social media app notification. In this case, I think, what I was more looking to get to is, I think sometimes you could filter from the web server, right? And have app server, which is like a web app server and a mobile app server, because I think I heard you mention, which was the right thing, that your web server could be a API gateway kind of a thing. So yeah, I think the API gateways can, I think, route the request, right, to the proper servers. And typically that's how we would distinguish between, which server is serving a mobile request versus the request coming from web. But that's good for now. I just wanted to know your thought process on that. Yeah, and okay, could we also maybe walk through, let's say this client is trying to book 5 tickets. Can we walk through with this? Yeah.
good. So do you want me to walk you through a whole starting, or can we just move from app server?
Yeah, that's
Okay.
good. We can do that.
So
Yeah.
let's assume that the app server has a request for 5 tickets over here. I think first of all, it will check if the SQL, like the database, if all those 5 seats are available. We are assuming that to be happening in app server only. We can have a different service also if we need. Let's assume that the 5 tickets by 5 seats are available. In that case, first of all, this seat ID over here, there is some kind of a booking status. Status will be booked to pending, and in the booking, we will also have a we will try to add a row with the status pending, and the linked hash map, which is for active, will contain will contain only one node with user ID and a list of tickets with the 5, because we are having partial, like either 5 of them gets filled or none of them gets filled.
Yeah.
Let's assume that like it is successful. In place of successful, we remove the linked hash map. We change the status over here and the status of the seats over here also. Some kind of an acknowledgement or notification is sent back to the app server that it is a success. Notification is also sent back to the waiting linked hash map. Let's assume that status was a failure, that the payment did not went through. In that case, the status is marked back as available, and the linked hash map is removed with the notification that like it was a success or a payment failure, some kind of a success, so that our app server knows how to deal with it. Let's take the scenario where the seats are partially available. If the user wants to book 5 tickets, but only 2 of them are available. In that case, there can be 2 design considerations. The first is totally cancel all the tickets, like user will be thrown back to the landing page. The other scenario is that user is like moved to the waiting link hash map, and it will wait until those 3 uh, like available tickets are either successfully booked or rejected. So like we get a proper status of this 3 things. So both of them can be we can go either way. And the last situation is that if there are no tickets available, if there are no tickets available, then we move back the user to the landing page. That is what we discussed. Is there any other situation that you want to consider?
I think one thing is, and this is just general suggestions, right? You have the DNS there. And I think in your workflow, I didn't come across any discussions around when are we using that DNS, rather the CDN, sorry, yeah. DNS, of course, yeah, it can resolve, but yeah. But what do you think, when do you think the CDN will come into the picture?
First of all, CDN is usually used to have static content like static images, static videos, or any static text. If we have description and images, if we have something like event display pic and some kind of an object storage that keeps the display pic, we can keep thumbnails or the pics in the CDN that will be used to display to the user. Another thing is JavaScript and CSS. So if we are having a website and if you're having some CSS or like scripting or something, we can put that text into CDN. We can directly call that to the user. Another thing which I can think of is the available seats. I'm not sure if this is a good idea or not, but if we just try to keep the available seats in the CDN or have some kind of a radius or a distributed cache close to the user, like the available seats, it will be improving latency and the users can like quickly request the service, because we know the app server, but downfall will be the app server has to keep track of the request, because if two users try to use the available ticket in the same time, we need to update the cache frequently. We can also have videos and audios, but I'm not going to that.
Yeah. Yeah, that's reasonable. I think, yeah, this is good. And maybe I want to, have the last 10 minutes for if you want to discuss some, concurrency constructs. Yeah, I just wanted a time check because I think we are at 9:55. We could go 10 more minutes, and yeah, I will expect you to wrap everything up. Yeah.
So I'll talk about some bottlenecks. Some of the biggest bottleneck is concurrency, like two users trying to book the same time, or if we have one overridden written records. I think one of the best way to have is to use locks or some kind of a synchronization script or service. SQL DB is generally used, and I believe SQL can do the task like any DBMS which has ACID compliances. The second, is that fine or okay?
Yeah, I think that's reasonable. Yeah.
If there's any other, we can also use message queue, but I'm not sure how it will be used in concurrency, to be honest. So I did not went for message queue. The second thing is scaling. Let's assume that right now we don't have much, but in the future we have like 100 cities in the US and it has to be extremely scalable. In that case, we can have like multiple redundancy and duplicate copies for each database as well as service. This will avoid single point of failure and try to have uniform distribution. In case of like a master failure, we can have master slave architecture, like one slave takes over. In case of master slave, everything fails, we can have some kind of database recovery scripts. It will take a longer time, but then it will be much more useful, like the database recovery script. Other than that, what else? Network failures. So suppose there is a network failure or something, so we are having a small buffer to make sure that the payment like gateway takes place. If we have over some kind of network failure over here that the web server or the app server is not reachable, then like message queues can be one thing. Other thing is we have many duplication, and we can have some kind of a storage server that keeps track of all the requests. Like we will just send a request that it is currently pending, but when the network comes back, we will process all the requests. And in the end, I will just like to take about what if there are different designs we had to consider. For example, if we used a SQL, but our constraint was that we had to use a NoSQL only with consistency, then we had to make sure there is a service which has a check every time or some extra coding and make sure that even though we are using NoSQL, we make sure that it is ACID compliant. Linked hash map, if we do not have to use linked hash map and we have to use some other data structure, then we had to make sure like a heap or a tree that can remove the most older timestamps in a very fast, efficient way. That was one thing. What else design considerations I can think of? App servers.
Yeah. One question I have is in this diagram, right? What happens if your load balancer goes down?
Load balancer goes down. So first of all, we are having the replicated load balancer to avoid single point of failures. If one of them goes down, master slave, one slave takes over. Now let's assume that all the master as well as the slave goes down. In that case, my service is actually unavailable for a small period of time. If we want to resolve it, like there is one way to remove load balancer, but suppose we want the load balancer as well as we want it to be highly available there. So we can use third-party services like Amazon. I think it has some AWS. That is one thing we can use. And other than that, if the load balancer goes down, can we use HTTP to directly call the web server? And I don't think it's a good idea, but because the web server will take heavy load. But if we don't have any other idea, then directly call the web server in case load balancer goes down.
Yeah, I think what we would do is we would have a same setup georeplicated, right? So in that case, your CDN or your DNS will direct the traffic to the similar setup which exists, let's say, on different coast or something, or even we can design however you would want. But yeah, this is something to keep in mind, right? And if you bring such thing up, it would show I think, attention to detail, right? Because you see, right, if you have just one LB set, right, a primary, secondary, if there is a network problem, let's say in the Seattle area, right, then no one can do any booking for any events in Seattle, right? Okay, yeah, that's good. I think one other question that came to my mind is, what kind of considerations do we need to do to monitor such a system?
Okay, so monitoring, like we can use
How would you
third-party.
ensure, sorry, I wanted to rephrase, like, for your understanding, like, how would you ensure that the entire system is, if anything goes down, how are you, drawing attention of the engineers that build the system? Yeah.
So some kind of a metrics or the important things that we want to see, dashboard or something. I believe that we need to take a look. So we can use third-party system like Prometheus monitoring, or we can use our own monitoring system. We will monitor the logs as well as some request to have like the data. Some data that we can have a look is first of all, I think available runtime, like how much time is it uptime. I think that's the most correct one. Is the system up or is the system failure? What other data can we think about? Is that so I'm not keeping any data about the users or the booking. Like we can have a data about how many seats are booked in a given time, but it does not give any information of the system availability. Latency can be one thing, is that keep a track of the average latency over a given time. What else data can we have can we have a
Yeah,
check on?
I think Prometheus is reasonable. I think one thing, I think to proceed systematically, right? I think one thing to think of is how would you gather the logs, right? I think that's where, and then from the logs, you can derive some metrics, right? Or emit the metrics, right? And it would come to some centralized system via logs. But yeah, I think we are not designing a logging system right now, but just quickly touching upon those things towards, if you have like a couple extra minutes, I think that's also good. Okay. I think somebody put in the chat that it's Fluentd. That's one option. If you can, maybe familiarize yourself. I think this is reasonable. Rahul, thanks for, going and, taking this mock interview. I think we can start the self-evaluation section if that's okay.
Yeah, sure. to give a self-evaluation. So this was like the first time I was giving a kind of a system design interview. I have read about booking the show in Educated, but I was not like completely prepared with it. There were many questions over here, like estimations was one thing that I was just like this big estimations on the flow. That was something difficult for me. And the other thing is there were many questions. Like example, I think one of them was the web versus mobile. I have never heard of it. Today was the first time I was hearing GeoDNS. And so there were many things that I have actually not heard of it. So overall, I can say that I have more chance to improve, and I like there is much scope of knowledge improvement. Uh, we can have more information on the design part if needed, like how is the partition done, or how data the go deep dive into the database and more into the booking section also. I think that was all. Overall, I think needs more improvement, I guess. Even the database structure could have been improved. Yeah, I don't. I think that's what I can think right now. Can't think of anything else.
Okay. Thank you, Rahul. Thank you, Amrita. Yeah,
Yeah.
for the interview, mock interview, and Rahul for the feedback. So, anybody wants to give any feedback to Rahul before by the time Amrita can also wrap up her thoughts? And it should be like a really quick feedback to Rahul. We won't do deep dive on technical thing. It would be just around the interview.
Yeah,
Maybe around payment process, we could have spoken a little bit. If what if the payment fails, and if how would you retry the failure on the payment side? I think that probably would be I mean, nice to handle in an interview, I guess, because that could be another single point of failure.
Okay, thank you.
yeah, this is Chavi, and I was kind of expecting to the area to be discussed more was about locking. How would we put the seats back into the pool? What should be the timeout for when a user is trying to reserve? Should be there a limit on the number of seats the user can reserve? Yeah, so I was looking more on that because I felt that is where the problem areas or the issues can be in such a system. Yeah.
Yeah,
Just
one input I had is how do you deal with bursty requests that come in let's say in an hour? There's a huge booking traffic that comes in. How do you handle that?
okay, thank you. But just to clarify, folks, so we are not discussing right now alternate designs. It is like any feedback to Rahul in general to improve upon, because looks like the feedback which is coming is very subjective, because things like this, how the law could happen, it's very subjective to interviewer and candidate. Every interview could be different based on the candidate experience and how interviewer wants to nudge the things. So if I want to give a one-liner feedback to Rahul, is that I felt he was very structured. He has thoughts in place, and he was having a good command on this whole interview process. Anything which I can give him, he can take things to next level is. This is again my personal opinion. So any interview should have 60-40 ratio, 60% candidate speaking, 40% interviewer speaking. So it should have a healthy collaboration and healthy balance. So in this interview, I felt interviewer was speaking 20-30% and candidate was speaking like 70-ish, which was, I felt, on the higher side. So candidate should keep a check with interview, like whatever I'm doing, I'm on the right direction. Do you want me to think different? Like some pointers to the interview. So interviewer will speak more, and you also able to know that what actually interviewer is looking for. It could be something interviewer is just riding with the flow with you, but on the back of interviewer mind, he or she might be thinking, oh no, when I could get a chance to do something different. So better to just keep a tab on the like what interview is trying to see. It's my feedback.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah.
My 2 cents is that once you finish your interview, just map your requirements with the design that you came up with. Like this is what this was a requirement, and this is how the design maps to it. That would close the gap.
This is excellent point. And let's say you don't have time, still ask interviewer that, hey, I just want to validate my design. Can you give me a minute or just give me 30 seconds? If you think like you're already on time, still ask for that. There's no harm asking. Interviewer say, okay, sorry, we don't have time. And then you can say, okay.
Okay.
Hello. Hello. Quick thing. If someone can give feedback on at Fang, like where would it stand? Like you have the levels, right? SD 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Like where would it stand? Like the way
Oh,
he's
so
done.
anything like that feedback I would not do where somebody fall at. I could give a private feedback on that, but won't assess based on Fang because it would demotivate the interviewer. I would say this was a good interview and you can go and proceed with that.
So yeah, I think all the feedbacks that I heard were very good. I think I would like to add to, I think, Asim's point regarding one thing I kind of would be good for you, Rahul, is let's say when we were gathering the requirements, right? One thing you could do differently is instead of only asking a question like what is the number of users, you could say that I am assuming that, let's say there are 1 million active users, daily active users. Is it good, or would you want me to scale up or down? Maybe that way, you are coming up with one suggestion and then seeking the interviewer input, and that leaves door open, like Asim mentioned, for a conversation. And with practice, I think this would definitely improve. You did very well, I think. That's from me. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you for the feedback. Yeah, and keep this in mind about all the feedback not by Kat.
And I think there's a question for you, Rahul. How did you prepare for this interview? Are you doing some preparation? Looks like people feel like you have an excellent command. So you want to share anything how you're preparing?
So I have like the Educated subscription and the Alex EU book. I just read these two books and went through the SDE skills YouTube. How did I prepare is like I usually just stick over here and I go through on my own. Like if my question is to design Facebook Messenger, then I just go through on my own and try to brainstorm like what can be the functional requirements. First chat one-on-one, and like I'm assuming I am the interviewer and I am the interviewee myself and try to brainstorm. That's what I try to do.
Oh, nice.
But the thing is, again, like with limited knowledge, I can, like for example, there was one web and mobile. I had just no knowledge that there can be different types of it. So yeah, maybe like by reading more and learning more about from others, I can incorporate.
Okay, awesome. Okay, with this, is there any other feedback which anybody wants to give to Rahul in terms of how he did, how things he did good and things he can take to the next level?
Yeah, Rahul, I thought you had a very good command on the question. It was very evident that you have learned well about this question because you were very fluent with the steps that, and I think you asked pretty good questions. So yeah, keep it up. Good work.
Thank you. So I think one question I can ask is that like I wanted to have a more conversation with the interviewer, wanted to like involve the interviewer, but then there were like some questions I could not. So in that situation, how can I involve the interviewer more? Like for example, there was one over here like if there are five, imagine a situation, there are five, and I think I talk for about 10 minutes over there. How can I involve the interviewer more?
So, like I think Amrita mentioned, things will come naturally with practice.
Okay.
So more mock interviews will give you more better ideas. But one thing, like I mentioned, I was mentioning earlier, like at everything, like have a checkpoint. Hey, do you think like I'm going in the right direction, or do you think I should think in a different way, or do you have any, or if let's say you have stuck and you don't have any idea, like you can say, hey, do you have any pointers here? Looks like I, I am not expert in this area, so with my knowledge I think this is something. Do you want to add something or change something? It should be most like you asking some very gentle questions to interviewer itself, like about your flow, what I would say. But these things comes naturally when you do more practice.
Get it. All right. Sounds good. Thank you for the feedback.
Yeah, Amrita, do you want to add something here? How?
Yeah, I think, yeah, one thing I would mention, I think Asim also touched on it earlier, is don't get too bogged down by the first mock interview, right? You would, pick one area, and for the next mock interview, okay, this is what I'm going to improve, right, in mock interview number 2, and then so on and so forth, right? Pick area number 3. If mock interview number 2 resolves the area you picked, you might sometimes need 2 to 3 mocks to, resolve one area. I think, also what I wanted to mention is also depends on how much experience you have, right? Sometimes, just real life experience. I went in a large tech company. I had 1 year experience. I think the interviewer had like 25 years experience. So, I think the communication wasn't very natural between the two of us. So in that case, I would not think too much about it, right? And take everything on my, as okay, I did this wrong. Sometimes it's just the matching, right? And in this case, I think I would say that you could, this is an aspirational goal, right? Let's say, because you are right now at 3 years of experience, if I'm not wrong. So let's say you have to plan like maybe a couple or 3 years ahead. At that time, I think potentially you would be interviewing for senior software engineer roles, right? So I think driving the conversation a little bit would be good. But I think those are the general things that came up, right?
Okay.
Yeah. I think, that was an excellent point. And even at somewhere you can even use your personal experience. Hey, in the past in my project, I did something like this, and that's how it worked for me. You can make it connect to real world back. Like this is not something you are doing. You have experienced this kind of thing in the past and being used in the real world.
Yeah, I think that sounds good. Yeah, thank you for the feedback, and I'll really take a chance for the next mock interview whenever I get it.
Yeah, I think it's all about practice. More practice gives more mental model. So this is not something you do day to day. Your job is something like a software engineer, but now to be in a pretty decent spot for interviewing, this has to be done. So it needs practice and time. Okay, and I also want to thank you, Amrita. She joined us for the first time, but she did really awesome job as a interviewer. So thank you so much, Amrita, for joining us today. So with this, if there is no more feedback, we can have a discussion on any component people want to give a different idea or anything. Like I think Chavi mentioned something about locking. Then there's one more person spoke about one other area. So up to and Vinil also asked something about in the start. I think he asked about I forget leveling. How the question could be different for different roles, something like that, right?
Right.
Yeah. So anybody wants to take a stab on that, like how the question could be different for different levels. So my understanding is question would be kind of similar for different levels based on the experience.
Just to clarify, I was just asking, like, what would you expect, like, now that we have like a good handle on this problem, right? So, what would we expect, like, at different levels?
Yeah,
from
so
the candidate?
basically different levels things might change. For a senior person, it could be like trade-offs, different trade-offs between technologies, and how quick you wrap up the interview. So the person who's doing designs every day, let's say, that person can even wrap up this interview in 20 minutes or 30 minutes because they know how the flow, they know what things to ask, right questions, vocabulary. So vocabulary matters the most, like what kind of vocabulary you are using, and that also reflects like person is like what level. That's my understanding, but anybody can add to that.
I think also, with experience, I think caching strategies would improve, right? I think write through versus, write around. And I think that's one thing we could have discussed. I think thinking through what kind of data that needs to be cached and then coming up with a caching strategy. Also, I think more senior candidates, I think two things. It also depends on which area you have expertise on, right? So let's say if the person has been working in a control plane team, in that case, I think they would talk more about, caching and load balancing and, sending the requests to the, I think, forwarding the request to the data plane and such things. But if the interviewee is working in a data plane team, then of course, yeah, you have to talk about, transaction management and how would you roll back the transaction and things of that nature. One thing I have also learned recently is mention why you are using a certain thing, right? Which I think we did a good job of. Let's say if, for example, you're using a queue, you can mention that, okay, it's streaming data. That's why I think queue is a reasonable, thing to use and things of that nature. I think that also will come with experience. And don't put anything in the design that maybe people don't need, right? Like in this case, for example, I think we were using like a DNS or CDN, right? And we didn't talk about it. And I think that's how you would, level candidates, right? How they are doing. I think very experienced people will also not just put LB right away, right? They'll just do a vertical single design, if that makes sense. Yeah.
Also, another area I think we did not talk about, probably, of course, not in the scope of this interview, but what is the backup strategy, right? The database backup.
Do you have any thoughts, Simhan, that if you have to do what you would be doing?
I think Rahul mentioned about master slave somewhere. But I think then what we didn't talk about is what are the downfalls of master slave architecture, right? And typically, I think, it depends on the nature of the, what trade-offs are we willing to accept, right? But I think, I think it could be, since it's a read heavy system, right? That also depends. So we have to take all these into consideration.
Hey, I have a question. At senior levels, are we expected to, let's say I mentioned that I'll be using leaderless replication or something, right? Am I supposed to also mention what specific technology I'll be using, what specific database I'll be using? If I'm saying that I'll be using a specific caching strategy, am I supposed to mention which cache, what exact cache I'll be using? And am I supposed to completely know the details of the tools which I'm going to mention there? Hello?
Yeah, I think the answer, it's a very good question and something I had thought a little bit about in the past. I think it depends, right? Let's say, for example, you are interviewing at Facebook, right? I think they use a bunch of different open source technologies, right? In that case, I would rather say it's better just to keep it generic, right? Unless the interviewer specifically asks that, could you, or in detail, right? That, okay, I know that Redis can be used if I need to do full text lookups. So I will use a Redis cache for, let's say, Airbnb search, right? Kind of search. But if you need like more like a peer-to-peer kind of a cache, you can use like a memcache, which I am not a very good expert on memcache, so I try to avoid. I would rather keep it either open or mention Redis. That's for myself, right? So similarly, if you have expertise, you can mention, otherwise keep it generic. And the only place I think this advice might differ is, let's say you're going and interviewing at AWS, right? In that case, you know that, okay, they have this database offering, right? So if you are designing a very high throughput relational database, you can mention that I'm going to use Aurora. It has 6 replications, and that would show that, okay, yeah, this person, knows about AWS ecosystem, I think. But anybody else can also chime in here, people that have different opinions. Yeah.
So yeah, I totally resonate with your opinion, Amrita. So only I think I would say companies like Facebook might not like if you say I would use S3 or something. If you want to say, still keep it very generic, like a public cloud offering like S3. So you're just saying like I would use a public cloud. In this design, I don't have time to build something like a public cloud or S3, so I would piggyback on that. Or if I would say rule of thumb, just try to use very generic words. Like I would use a NoSQL database, or I would use a document DB, or I would use a distributed cache, or I would use a key value pair cache. So every technology is kind of mapped to something, or for S3, it is like a blob storage or something like that, distributed blob storage or distributed object storage. So then you are not tying that to any technology. And then somebody asks like, hey, can you elaborate more on distributed cache? You can, like, up to your experience, you can say like, hey, I don't have much experience. I know very high level. If you want, we can chat. Otherwise, this is what I know.
Yes, my question was to around your last point. Should we drop names there or not? I mean, if I say that I don't really know exactly about this technology and I'm interviewing at a senior level, would that be a damp or would it still be okay?
Again, you are looking for senior staff. That means like they are expecting more, so need more preparation, need more research. That's what we are doing right now. The whole reason we are doing all these mock interviews and presentation deep dives, when you go to real interview, you have a better opinion.
Right. Yes. Okay. Got it.
Awesome. Okay. So what I could do is with this, I can. I think I can stop the recording right now. After that, if people want to hang around, they can chat about the design or anything. And otherwise, people can even leave. Okay, with this, I would stop the recording then.
Yeah, and thanks, Asim.